Where's our Zigmund?
Papa's here.
He's here. He can't come up, so I must go down. Oh, she's a good girl. But we'll never get up those stairs again.
Of course we will. Come. She's not so good. Just a few steps.
And Google Hoop. Google Hoop.
Aunt Mina, happy birthday.
You do it. I can't anymore. Sometimes I think I'll see better when I'm dead. Birthdays. It's to laugh. It's my fault. I shouldn't have come down.
That's the poets have known all along. That's why I take it as a compliment when people call my dream book fiction.
What I've read has been highly complimentary.
Well, give me insults every time. After all, it's the same resistance one meets in Patience. Dragon guarding the gold. We hear the same thing privately, or from Martha's friends. Poor Frau Dr. Freud. Her husband was such a promising neurologist. Now she finds herself married to a disgusting freak. And what they mean is, some women have all the luck. I remember somebody, my mother, I think, when I was a child, rubbing their hands together, showing me the little scales of dirt with dead skin, telling me that's what we were made of. Scraps of earth. What a lot of fuss we make.
I do think you protest too much about the book. How many copies did Darwin sell?
10 times as many. But then he didn't write high-flown obscurities. I'd like to write the whole thing again from the beginning.
Nonsense. The style is quite lucid enough. The writing is excellent.
But you've been feeding me lukewarm compliments all day. I can't take any more of it.
Speaking purely for myself, and since you know that I'm committed to your work, I have to say that I can see an element of danger in it.
Danger? Who to?
I mean the danger that no matter how cautious, no matter how objective he may be, the mind reader, I mean no offense, may inadvertently read his own thoughts into a subject's mind.
Of course.
While your work was concerned with childhood seductions, these were at least events that could be verified in many cases. But where a child's fantasies are concerned, you cross the line between what can be tested and what can never be more than an inspired guess. At least in my opinion. No one can doubt that you make great discoveries, but to speak with the authority of science, you must be sure that you're not merely choosing or inducing the kind of evidence that suits your purpose.
I see. Et tu, Brute.
Zigmund.
Science or what you call science, would not exist without inspired guesses. You know that if anyone does. You know quite well you can make your numbers fit anything you like. The fact is, you believe life marches to a rhythmic drum, you're certain of it, and you work from that hypothesis. You find that a woman's 28-day cycle doesn't work for men, so you come up with a 23-day cycle. And if that doesn't fit the case, you multiply the two together, subtract 5, and if needs be, add the number you first thought of.
Not so.
Not so. You are the scientist, then. Wilhelm, we cling to our blindness, to our precious fear and anxiety. We use all the cunning at our disposal to put the hunter off the scent, like you just now. Like every patient protesting when the inner sanctum is threatened. You're imagining it, doctor. And it's then I know I have it.
Why should I resist? I'm not your patient.
No, you're a doctor. You should know better. Do you know why you're a doctor? Or rather, do you want to know why?
I'm perfectly well why I'm a doctor.
Or rather, do you want to know why you're a specialist in one field rather than another? Where did you first encounter the diseases of the nose? At your father's sickbed. And no one could help him. No one could cure the suppuration. So what is young Wilhelm to do? Become a rhinologist?
To compensate?
No, not to compensate. And not out of loving grief, but in revenge for his hold over your mother and your sister Clara. And now you can operate on your patients, and every one is your father.
You go too far.
You see, you don't want to know. The irony is, I'd already have more of your so-called proof if I had your good fortune.
My good fortune?
Just to have an infant son to study. Mine are all too old, too devious, and they know my tricks. Well, what I know of the stages of infancy, I've learned from your observations. In fact, it's about time I did some original work of my own. I've been planning a new work to be called Bisexuality in Man. And Woman, needless to say. Or another unscientific thesis?
Hardly. I've been arguing for it myself for years now, as much to you as anyone.
You have? You're not calling me a plagiarist?
After the way you've just dismissed my whole vocation, it would be a mild reproach.
Oh, come now, Wilhelm.
I must go back to the hotel before Ada arrives.
Her Highness is joining us? You didn't tell me. Don't look so peeved. Her dowry was a princely one. Though I admit it's her exalted manner.
I must ask you not to call her that to her face in future. Or to mine. She's coming on the express.
I'm home! Hello! Hello!
How is Wilhelm?
He's fine. We nearly climbed a Seaberg. He's fine. Hello! In the morning, when I made my way down to the dining room for breakfast, he and Ida were already up, dressed to the nines, eating away. And for some reason, there was only one other chair at their table, and Felice put his cloak over it. Not just hanging over it, he put it around the chair, covering it. We said hello. I stood beside them for a moment. Silence. And finally, it was Ida who said, "Willy, your cloak. Zigmund wants to sit with us." One of us always outgrows the other. Perhaps he was of no great worth in the first place.
Now it starts.
Well, I don't know. I'm a poor judge of men. You've told me so yourself. It's true. They frighten me. Yes, I know. I frighten them. It comes to the same thing. It's one of my worst qualities, a certain contempt for others. Whether they frighten me or I them. In the depths of my heart, I can't help feeling that my fellow men are as morally untrustworthy as I am. But I fight against it, I fight against.
Don't fight so hard.
Do you know what migraines signify?
They signify an excuse for me to come and keep you company.
Well, like all symptoms, they are directed at somebody. Above all, at that first prehistoric love, who can never be equaled later. La donna che non si trova. The true love who is never to be found.
Does this apply to migraines in particular?
No. I have a patient who whimpers in his sleep, who longs to be taken to his mother's bed, who died when he was 2 years old. No. Migraines, in particular, I think, represent a forcible defloration. A wish for it, that is. As a result of a fantastic parallel equating the head with the other end of the body. Hair in both places.
I can't help thinking, what a disappointment it must be then. For the other end of the body.
Yes. You know The Bride of Corinth, where Goethe makes the young man fall in love.
Yes.
Yes, but not with his intended Christian bride, but with the other pagan sister. A youth to Corinth, whilst the city slumbered, came from Athens.
Siggy. Enough.
Prose, then? Have you read Merezhkovsky's book, The Antichrist? It's about Leonardo. When he meets his Mona Lisa, her smile reawakens a memory. The smile of rapture on his mother's face as he suckled at the breast. But instead of making love to her, he paints the picture, and he pays with self-denial for the world's applause. On the whole, I prefer Goethe's hero. He has his cake and eats it. But then he's a simple Athenian and doesn't aspire to great achievement.
Do you want this or not?
Minna.
You've got letters to write. I'll leave that there, in case the pain returns.
Don't go. I do aspire to some achievement, right, when I'm not blinded by self-pity. Don't go yet. It's from a psychiatrist called Stekel, with a number of other signatories. I don't know any of them.
When did you receive this?
A few days ago, a week perhaps. I hadn't even answered it.
We have read your book on dreams, with its revolutionary vision of the human unconscious. Thanks to you, the secret forces of repression which have tyrannized us privately and publicly can never go unrecognized again. We believe that you have set us free.
From the posturing of consciousness. It's a handy phrase. I think I'll steal it.
Why haven't you shown me this before?
I suppose I've enjoyed my isolation. And I've used it. My dear Herr Dr. Stekel, I confess myself greatly flattered by your letter. And I welcome your proposals, which come at a time when I truly believed myself to be alone in my endeavors. As a result, you find me the prisoner of a fixed and somewhat solitary, even rigid routine. My only forays into public life are my visits to the tobacconist next the Café Landmann. My days are filled with patients whenever possible until 9 o'clock at night.
Yes, of course, and the same...
Might I suggest a Wednesday evening for our get-togethers? If my last patient is not fully analyzed by 7:30, I shall send him out half-cooked into the night and make my quarters ready for you. Dear Adler, you must be aware how much I value your contributions to our Wednesday Society, and I particularly welcome your offer to read us a paper on sadism and neurosis, thereby expanding my own work on the sexual perversions, which, as you know, has attracted more than its fair share of attention.
Good morning. Herr Dr. Freud. Meissel.
Herr Meissel?
I should like to take this opportunity to tell you what a depraved and filthy-minded man you are.
Thank you.
What did he want?
Oh, like the others, a chance to congratulate me on the professorship.
Dr. Fader. Oh, no, I have no comments to add. Yes, I would agree. I would agree. Certainly. Dr. Adler.
Well, I feel I must say this. I think that Dr. Task has adhered somewhat too slavishly to the concept of the latency period in childhood. No one here questions the concept, but we cannot ignore the fact that certain developments, sexual in their consequences, if not in their nature, affect the individual between infancy and puberty. The child is increasingly subject to the spirit of competition during this time, in forms which recapitulate, we may say, the passionate contests of the nursery. Nevertheless, he is learning to compare himself to his fellows, both socially and physically, whether for better or for worse. And surely these experiences will also mold his attitudes to his fellows in later life and his sexual responses.
If I might say so,
to mention only one aspect of the prepubertal struggle.
Do I have the right to reply?
Of course.
Thank you. This is mere ego psychology. The diphasic nature of our sexual evolution, entailing a resumption of the sexual life in puberty, is precisely what distinguishes our psychic development from that of animals. It's the seedbed of neuroses, the gap, the lull in our development. And to suggest that such surface influences as playground squabbles could be seen as decisive.
My dear Task, I did
not enough to make a passing reference to recapitulation. Nothing but recapitulation. The sexual stage is already set in infancy. Erotic attraction for another person manifests itself between the ages of 2 and 4. Though I would submit that the height of the Oedipus complex is frequently delayed until 5 or even 6. By which time the competitive spirit is thoroughly engaged on the level of the ego and will be mastered, or not, in the light of earlier Oedipal confrontations, rather than the other way around. I hope the Herr Professor will share his comments with me later, no matter how derogatory they are.
Read it.
Let's dispense with this business of the urn if it makes the younger members impatient.
I agree, especially if people are to be allowed to answer back. Not to say interrupt.
Wasn't interrupting.
Gentlemen, please, please.
Are we all finished?
Yes.
Very well, then. If Otto would be kind enough to see to our replenishment, we can regard the formal exchange of views as terminated and insult each other quietly. There is one other matter I feel I should report.
It is very good.
I have been in correspondence with 2 members, inmates, I was going to say, of the Burg Heuzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich. Bleuler and Jung. 2 leading lights among the staff there. Bleuler I'm not so sure about. He wants us on his own terms. But Jung, I think, is genuinely impressed with our work. As an adherent, he would naturally be an asset. He seems an experienced and cultivated man. But as a campaigner on our behalf, his contribution could be beyond price. I say it without apology. We are Jews, a fact not lost upon the world. And if our efforts are not to be labeled a Jewish science, easily derided, we must have allies. even among the Swiss. Do any of you have any knowledge, professional or personal, of the man Jung?
To tell the truth, this is not what I think of as typically Viennese.
No?
No offense to your compatriots, but their taste in art is usually so garish. You don't mind my saying so?
Not in the least. But I warn you, be tactful with my colleagues here. They pride themselves on their good taste.
Oh, of course, I defer to them as scholars. Many of them I admire. Others, if I may be frank with you, are not of the highest caliber. Fanatics, decadents, in my opinion, amateurs.
We're in Austria, and an outcast science attracts eccentrics. Adler has some interesting ideas. And the pig finds truffles. Unfortunately, a socialist pig finds socialist truffles, the truffles of envy.
There is much to envy for a pupil of Freud.
Enough to go around, I hope, beyond our little circle. What we need now are advocates, translators. We need ambassadors. The English are ready to hear from us, I think, provided they can understand it. The French, I'm not so sure about. The Germans certainly will understand it, once they're told to. Please come through. You don't by any chance have contacts with the Kaiser?
Forgive me, Herr Professor, I'm only a lecturer in psychiatry.
You might have treated one of his relatives. My study's in here.
Will you excuse me for a moment? I won't detain you long. No, I'm afraid I have no contacts on that level, socially speaking. Besides, I am a heretic, like you, by nature.
Do you always shout so in Switzerland? We are rather quiet here. Shut the door.
I brought you my book on dementia praecox. I believe it shows for the first time how severe mental disturbance may be understood in terms of your own theory of neurosis. But if I'd had the temerity, I would have dedicated it to you. Reading your work has brought about a rebirth in my approach to medicine. Till you've read it, I realize my veneration will seem hollow.
My dear Jung, you make me thoroughly uneasy with your compliments. Now, I'll tell you why. We both know that a Christian and a pastor's son finds his way to me only against great inner resistances. And those resistances express themselves in different ways. Bravado, self-abasement. I've no doubt you're aware of this. So, tell me about your work.
My doctoral thesis was in the psychology of the occult. It was this subject which turned me toward psychopathology. As you know, I am a senior physician at the psychiatric clinic at Berghurst.
And what made you take up such a despised field?
Well, while I was at university, I read a psychiatric textbook by Krafft Ebing. At the time, my courses were in anatomy and histology. But my family was unable to support me financially in my ambition to become a specialist, so I had no choice but to resort to general practice. I was lucky enough to get a post under Bleuler at the hospital as a psychiatrist. It is a despised field, as you say. But Goethe puts it well, every great man inherits an age of ignorance. Now, until recently, you could say that the work largely consisted of tabulation, itemizing symptoms in the crudest possible way. The patient displays such and such contortions, the patient doesn't speak, the patient speaks nonsense. No one asked what happens inside the severe cases. For me, illumination came with the interpretation of dreams. For Bleuler, too, of course, as director, he doesn't wish to appear sectarian. But the more we interpret psychoanalytically, the more meaning we find in psychotic symptoms which had seemed quite senseless. Recently, I've been experimenting with word association using a stopwatch.
A stopwatch?
To compare the intervals between the questions and the patient's answers as a means of grading the sensitivity of the material and measuring the resistance. I've brought some detailed figures with me, if we have time. And I found that I could only communicate with her by means of a strange charade. I was her son. Every day was Mother's Day in the ward. I had to bring her presents, imaginary ones, of course. But during these interviews, she was completely rational. An illustration, I think, of the way in which mental disturbances are also an attempt, and I'm sure the Herr Professor will bear me out, to reach sanity, an expression of the desire for sanity, an attempt to escape the disease.
And to protect it. After all, you were her prisoner.
No, she was the prisoner. Though I admit she was a tyrant when she was sane, a martinet with a deep, deep voice. A classic example of the failure to keep the two halves of the personality in balance, masculine and feminine. Just as the man must not deny his feminine side, so the woman must not deny her masculinity, or it will compensate in startling ways, as in this case. Our shadow self is not to be denied.
Does he get this from you?
No.
The two must be in harmony within, like a well-matched couple.
The bookcase disapproved.
I think it's telling us it's time to eat.
Oh, yes, of course. I've kept you far too long.
No, on the contrary. Sundays we keep for visitors.
But we only feed the interesting ones.
If you'll excuse me, Herr Doctor.
Of course. Does it often make such sounds? It's my ambition to live in a haunted house. Don't you believe in communication with the dead? Who lived in this house before you?
The house isn't old.
Perhaps not, but there must have been one here before.
The previous tenant was an old school friend of mine, Victor Adler, now a troublesome politician and very much alive.
Victor Adler. Then you've a socialist spirit in your bookcase.
My bookcase is entirely apolitical. Look at the books.
Well, then no wonder it's complaining. I think the only difference between us on the matter of childhood is that you can go further still. Not only does adulthood recapitulate the earlier stages of infancy, childhood itself rehearses the infancy of man, the primitive history of mankind. I'm convinced of it, that during the first months and years, we lived through a kind of animism, totemism, with perhaps even darker prehistoric forces around the cradle. Stone Age figures, Stone Age dreams.
Perhaps. In that regard, you're far better read than I. Oh, yes. You know, tonight at dinner, my family were treated to a novel experience. I was made to listen. It's been many years since I've come across such an impressive range of interests.
For me, this has been a memorable day. Just to be here. Among these photographs, the whole history of our science seems to unfold. Charcot, Breuer. So much has changed within your lifetime. Even the illnesses, you must find it strange. There's so many fewer cases of hysteria in the old sense, don't you find? With fainting fits, grande hystérie. Fewer cases than we were taught to expect.
Every age has its diseases. They move on. Like everything else. Are you sure you never drink?
No.
But less so in your field, I should say. True madness has no history. I could never have become a psychiatrist. You know, I sometimes think psychoanalysis is only any use to the kind of people who barely need it. People who can understand, who can learn how to help themselves, how to free themselves. people of some worth with at least a glimmering of culture. Like you and me. My dear Jung, I cannot hide my delight at the news that you plan to abandon Bloiler and set up on your own. Do not go back on this. You feel a traitor to the man, I know, but remember, without some criminality, there is no achievement. All the same, I did not mean to influence you so precipitately when I came into your life. Do you realize we spoke for 13 hours non-stop the other day? And I do not have a reputation for being garrulous with my colleagues. You may be grieved to hear I have sorted out the business with the bookcase. Our caretaker, an unlikely exorcist, informed me that the water pipes are responsible. When the warm water comes at 6 o'clock, the wood expands in answer. I only wish you could be here to celebrate the coming of Bellitas Edulis. These are precious weeks, when the children are outdoors all day, and I can enjoy them freely without feeling that I'm snatching time from the few creative years ahead of me. Happily, my appetite to return to Vienna has been whetted by the arrival of a remarkable new patient. A Russian nobleman with more symptoms than the Tsar has mistresses.
It was night in the dream. Winter. My bed stood with its foot toward the window. Outside, I could vaguely see the walnut trees. Then, suddenly, the window seemed to open of its own accord. I couldn't look away. Outside, only a few feet away, were 6 or 7 white wolves sitting in the nearest tree. White, with their ears pricked and tails like foxes. They sat quite still in the branches on either side, looking at me, their whole attention riveted on me. I think it was my first anxiety dream. I was 3, perhaps 4 at the time.
How did the dream end?
I screamed, and my nurse came running, and I tried to describe the dream to her. They were so lifelike, the wolves. Shall I draw them for you?
The idea that the wolves represent the source of all childhood fears, the boy's father, may be plausible enough. But we are asked to accept that at the same time the wolves represent the boy himself in their immobility, watching him, that he is the watcher as well as the watched. That the dream masks a memory of watching something terrible, his parents making love in the manner of beasts a tergo while he was younger still.
Yes, that was the dream, yes.
Why?
Why?
Why wolves?
Precisely.
Why 6 or 7? Why white wolves? Because of the white of the bedclothes under which his parents seemed to be struggling.
Yes.
This I find fanciful, to say the least.
But the least you can do is turn up at these meetings and listen.
Well, if I may be permitted to answer, it is, of course, not only fanciful, but fantastic, as befits the iconography of dreams. How else can they escape the censorship of the mind, except in code, in puns, inversions, outlandish similes? Every one can be deciphered, and in more than one way. Because the issue here is not whether this particular interpretation is correct, but whether it leads where all the other trails lead, to the heart of the patient's condition, his fear of a bestial assault in infancy.
Yes, exactly.
Well, all trails must lead.
The patient himself recognizes his fear of the father.
Surely, yes.
That's the common thread.
I have never denied that threat.
You constantly deny that.
Never denied it. But it is here and now that the patient recognizes it. We have no way of knowing for certain whether these are genuine memories that he provides the analyst or merely the fantasies of adult life.
Can we be so naive as to ignore the way a patient uses the past to put us off the scent of present troubles?
Precisely. It can be an evasion of the truth, one of the many faces of resistance.
I'm sure we can agree that this is a matter of emphasis and not dogma.
It's not a matter of emphasis. The natural scientist is a dogmatist. Yes, he lays down a principle and he declares that is how it is.
We are not alone in this opinion. Even the infallible Jung has suggested that the pathogenic cause may lie in the present moment.
Yes, no wonder. He's at pains to obscure the source of his own neurosis.
What neurosis? The Swiss have no neuroses. Mountain air suffices to dispel them. No, it's no laughing matter. The man who declares himself without neurosis has no right to become an analyst.
No, enough of this. Enough. How dare you speak of an absent colleague in this fashion? Would you say so to his face? But you say it in Freud's presence and expect us to permit it. You, who are completely unaware of the aversion you create in everyone around you.
Perhaps it is time for those of us with a brother complex to declare their interest in this proceedings.
So I do. Willingly. But I will not hear the cornerstone of Freud's work treated as the subject for derision.
Well, if we could return to the matter at hand.
Yes. It seems to me that Dr. Adler does not dispute the importance of the primal scene in the foundation of the patient's neurosis.
Exactly what he does.
This being the cornerstone in question. Fear of the father, which goes hand in hand with the child's jealous passion for the mother. Adler merely wishes to draw our attention to the way in which the man's present condition has activated, shall we say, the crucial memories. In essence, his view of the case is substantially the same as Freud's.
Unfortunately for this conclusion, there are two people here who do not share it. Freud and Adler.
You snake.
A group is an obedient herd which cannot live without a master, who must possess a strong and imposing will, which the group itself, having no will of its own, can accept from him. One thing I do insist upon, through all the accusations and vilifications, we must not abandon the discoveries simply to make them more palatable to the rebel. We must stand by the primacy of sexuality. That, above all. Promise me that, no matter what refinements of technique you bring us. One other business I wanted to discuss with you. I've been invited to speak at Clark University in Massachusetts. It seemed to me we should present an international front with yourself and perhaps Ferenczi, our Hungarian champion. I think the Americans will like him, don't you? I did a shameful thing today. We met Breuer and his daughter in the street, and I didn't even greet the man. Jung says coincidence follows him everywhere. Perhaps he's right. It came just as we were discussing the core of our wretched disputes. I've asked myself whether I did it so as to forego an opportunity to show off my newfound honors. But that won't do. I simply shrank from the encounter, like a snail into his shell. Jung saw it. He was quite taken aback. Do you suppose he understands? The sadist is a masochist at heart?
Are you insured against the journey? I am. How much? 10,000 marks. And you, Herr Professor?
20,000.
It's only right.
If I know him, he hasn't insured at all. He trusts in God to deliver him from the whale.
In God? Oh, I'd been told you were a mystic.
A reformed mystic. In psychoanalysis, he has eaten of the tree of paradise and acquired knowledge. It's a metaphor which casts me as the serpent. But let it pass.
Let me be the serpent. Just one glass. Won't you join us?
No. In the process, he's given up the pleasure principle altogether.
A scientist should never drink.
On the contrary, he must drink. Science is the most complete renunciation of the pleasure principle known to man. If you didn't drink...
Now, surely we should at least toast our venture in whatever liquid we choose.
To America.
To our new continent. Not the least of the pleasures this voyage affords for me is the opportunity to see you learn to know each other better. Psychoanalytically speaking, this is my son. I've said as much to Frenchie on earlier occasions. And when this empire I have founded is orphaned, you and you alone will inherit. Like Joshua, he is destined to explore the promised land, which I am only permitted to view from afar. So come. You must take one more bite from the tree. Come.
I understand that a form of primitive wine was among the last things to be consumed by the unfortunate victim of the Bremen bogs.
What? What are you talking about?
A local curiosity. A man from the Stone Age or thereabouts, I don't know exactly, but preserved here in the peat bogs. They have the corpse in the museum now. I thought we might visit it tomorrow if there is time. Have you been to the city before, Herr Professor?
Once. With fleece.
I have seen the bog corpses. They're very interesting. One in particular, and you're right, he was given wine before he died. It was a ritual execution. The man in question, the best preserved specimen, was garroted and then placed in the bog. The rope they used has decayed, but you can see the marks around his neck. The body is intact, so much so that an analysis was possible on the contents of the stomach, establishing the man's last meal, wine, some seeds, a kind of gruel. We have the clothes, we have some pieces of incised bone, reindeer bone, used in worship. It's uncommonly interesting.
Must you go on about it?
I don't see the harm.
What is it then? Can't you wait? You want me dead too?
For God's sake, help me!
Are you all right? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Shall we go upstairs? Do you think Jung has jumped overboard? He didn't come down for breakfast.
Not while I was there, certainly.
I owe you both an apology for the other night. Not a very auspicious start to our voyage of discovery.
Too much excitement.
Oh, no, you know better than that. Some portion of unruly homosexual emotion, I dare say, is still awaiting the proper cathexis. Allow me that much honesty.
I, too, have a confession to make. Last night, I dreamed about my mother.
How good it is to find an analyst who dreams about his mother. My dear Ferengi. Yes? Come in.
Good morning.
You've been up on deck?
I was on my way back to my cabin, but I thought I must inform you. A most remarkable thing.
Another coincidence?
On deck, I met my cabin steward. He was sitting reading. I thought, lazy fellow. The book was The Psychopathology of Everyday Life.
But this is no coincidence. What do you say, Ferengi? It's an omen. Cabin stewards versed in psychoanalysis. Come, sit with us. You've earned your place, my boy.
I think this ship is altogether safe. Groans.
Sit here. We were discussing our dreams just now.
I was confessing to my dream. C'est à vous.
Very well. A cabin steward? Did you talk with him?
No, I was too amazed. Besides, the motion.
Never mind. My dream was a most pleasant one, rocked in this little space. I was a child again, in Freiberg, picking flowers. 2 beautiful clumps of celandine, just as it used to be. A dream with that sense of reality that always signifies unusual importance. Perhaps simply that only childhood itself is real, and sexual adventure, which is childhood revisited.
Is your dream concerned with sexual adventure?
Possibly. Yes. With a desire to obtain pleasure without cost, for once. You see?
But surely, obtaining pleasure is not necessarily identical with sexuality.
Really? You will become a little Adler unless you're careful. And the prince will turn into a toad.
Your turn now. Tell us your dream.
I can't oblige. I was up all night with sickness. The Swiss are not good sailors.
Not much longer at sea, my friend.
And I believe our founder, Jonas Clark, would have been proud as I am today, to welcome to Clark University the founder of a school for pedagogy already rich in new methods and achievements, leader among the students of psychology and sex, of psychotherapy and analysis, Zigmund Freud of the University of Vienna.
America is gigantic. A gigantic mistake. The greatest experiment in the history of mankind, and it's a failure. Jung says it went wrong when they started to kill the Indians. I don't know. Perhaps they didn't kill enough.
Did you visit Coney Island?
Yes, they showed us everything. They took us to the cinema, to restaurants. Well, they don't know how to eat at home, these people. They can't find the time. Which is understandable, since their cooking is disgusting. Imagine a country without wild strawberries. Still, they appeared to be quite pleased with us.
That'll be the photographer.
Let him wait a few minutes. I need to prepare a photography face.
I'll show him in next door.
I hope that isn't the photography face.
No.
You look tired.
Well, it comes of running around with younger colleagues. Marty, when I return from the International Congress, I think I shall need a holiday. The truth is, I am unfit to be a leader. I'm too jealous of the long years spent struggling with the work myself. What I wanted was for people to flesh out my first attempts, to shore them up, not tunnel off in every direction. The whole structure will collapse and the seam will be lost. Like a dead mine with "danger, keep out" posted above it. They all want quick results. Psychoanalysis must be a factory turning out normal people. You know, I think of the occasions when I can say, I've cured a patient, removed the symptoms. They're usually the least fruitful cases, barely worth recording. Cured. Analysis isn't a kind of aspirin. It's a lifelong pursuit for the self-styled healthy and the sick. It's a philosophy or it's nothing. And they don't seem to be able to understand that, the Adlers and the Stekels. The public do. People aren't fooled. They know there's nobody to run to anymore. We must turn and face our demons without cant and live with them as best we can without destroying ourselves. People know it, even in their despair. They know it.
And they think that's what you're telling them. I doubt it.
No. What they think is that it's something shocking. To do with sex, as the Americans call it. And it is shocking, because I'm saying we must liberate ourselves from the secret tyranny of sexuality. Then and only then can we put instinct at the service of civilization.
Ah, by suppressing it.
You remember we talked of Leonardo once, transforming his desires? It was the same for Michelangelo, whose passions were homosexual. Don't you remember our talk?
I thought then what a hypocrite you could be. I've heard you say that homosexuals should be shipped off to South America.
Nonsense. Not because they're homosexual. Any man who cannot learn to keep his sexuality within bounds, no matter what the object of his lust. That's what I meant. I'm not shocked by perverse emotions or perverse acts. But as for criminals, they should all be sent to South America, and quickly too. And I'd pay for Adler to go with them. You wouldn't believe what lengths I had to go to persuade him to accept Jung as our new president. Don't you understand that without a Gentile at our head, our whole survival is at stake? They'll tear the coat from my back. Of course, if my name was Oberhuber, none of it would be necessary. And Jung himself now speaks all kinds of nonsense. We can forget the Oedipus complex and the libido. He thinks it sounds too repressive. One day he's calling for a new spirit of religion in the world. The next, he's on his knees, begging my forgiveness. But somehow I still think he's the best of them. Once he outgrows these tantrums. Don't you think? He still recognizes my authority. And despite everything, or despite himself, he wants to like me.
Yes, that much I do know.
You've spoken to him.
He wants your trust. Or so he said.
Then he must earn it. Only last month, I wrote to him to arrange a meeting. He never answered. I went. He wasn't there. Now he accuses me of posting the letter too late, when the truth is he kept it for 3 days before opening it. Problem in a nutshell. I didn't know you'd spoken of such things with Jung. One must be careful. I don't imagine you discussed personal matters.
Why not? Sometimes you behave as if you had no idea.
Of what? How hard it is for you?
Yes, for me and for Marty.
But you needed an audience for your suffering.
Ha! And you don't.
So now, I must pay for your guilt. And you tell me how hard it is. Do you think I haven't seen you together? You and Martha, working side by side with the same tender, suffering air, brimming over with love for one another. Yes, for the first time in your lives. How you hated one another. And now, at last, you have something in common. Don't misunderstand me. More than a man, you have a grief in common. What more could a woman ask?